Right, lads and lasses, following on from the little video I made a few days ago about this 52560E electric powered JCB Loadall, where I asked you for your questions and your opinions and your thoughts on this new development from JCB. I thought I'd now follow up. Well, I've got the answers for you. Well, I've got quite a few answers for you anyway. So we've been driving it now for a few days around the farm, trying it out, see what's what, getting stuck in, doing various jobs, and hopefully we've got a good few answers for you. As ever, we've got the full review video coming up in a couple of weeks' time, so go check that out when it comes out. Hopefully that'll answer even more questions for you. But for now, we'll get stuck into some of your questions that you sent in via the farming forum and Facebook and YouTube and whatnot. So we'll kick off. First couple of questions. So I've got them down here, lots of them. Thanks for sending them in. You did not disappoint. There's some absolute crackers in here. So first couple of questions from Farmer Set on the farming forum. What to do if it runs out of power? And also from Chris Fellows on the farming forum. Can it be towed? Well, if it does run out of power and you are nowhere near your charging point, your options, well, they're fairly limited, to be fair. You either get a bloody long extension lead, depending on where you are, to charge it back up, or you somehow get some power to it, like a generator or something like that, and just top it up so you can limp your way back to the yard. It's not a simple case of just taking out a drum of diesel and topping it up, unfortunately. The other one is towing it. Can it be towed? Which Chris Fellows asks. Yes, it can. But the park brake needs manually winding off. There is a procedure in the handbook, I'm told, by JCB, and some spanners are needed to back the brake off, obviously, but apparently it's not a major job. Right, so what generates heat for the heater? That's Richard Bradley on Facebook. Fairly simple. It's got its own built-in heating element to warm the air up for the fans that's in the cab. So it's basically, if we're going to be technical about it, it's a 96 volt positive temperature coefficient ceramic heating element system. So it's got that to warm the air that's coming into the cab, and then it's also got the front and the side and the rear windows. They're all heated by the 12 volt battery system that's on this, with the grid wires incorporated into the windows. Right, Mark Hatton on the farming forum asks, can you monitor the battery life? Yes, you can. It's lit up on the colour display on the dash here, and it's there. It's shown permanently for you. So there's kind of no excuses not to monitor your battery life. I don't know if you can see it off that camera. You'll be able to see it better on the proper review video, but there is an indicator there. It's on 100% at the moment, and then you can just monitor it as it goes down. Apparently when it gets down to, well, I say apparently, we've already found this, when it does get down to about 20%, that's kind of the recommended point where you should be topping it up. You can keep going, obviously. Once you get down to about 12%, the machine starts derating. It's the hydraulics that are derated first, so you'll start to see a performance drop off in the hydraulics, and then if you keep pushing it and pushing it, the transmission then starts to derate, so you'll notice the machine starts to slow down and its performance drop off. So at that point, it is giving you quite a few clues and a few indications to actually mush, get back to the yard and get topped up. Right, Fahrenheit on the farming forum. Cracking question, possibly my favourite question. Is it for ants? Now, I'm assuming you're referring to the size of the machine. It is a small machine, obviously. So, not quite. But, from what we found, it does seem to have the strength of an ant. As in that, it is a very capable performer. So, it sounded like a daft question, but it's actually quite a good question. Right, Jamie Shields on YouTube. He asks, what protects the battery if something falls on it? Well, not a lot really. It's the same protection that the diesel engine would get. It is literally just the bonnet. So if a bale or something does drop on it, it's going to land on the bonnet and probably crush the bonnet. But where the battery is sat in the engine bay, well, in the bay, it's not really the engine bay, in the bay under the bonnet. So where the battery's sat, the battery's actually sat at the bottom, and above the battery there's probably about this much gap. So if something did land on the bonnet and cave the bonnet in, it's quite, it'd have to go a long way to actually hit the battery. So yes and no on the protection front on the battery from a physical impact. Right, cracking question now, one that you're probably all asking. Operation costs. That's from Jamie Shields on YouTube. Well, in terms of what it costs to charge the battery, on the first day it arrived, it had hardly any juice in it, and we ran it down to about 3%, so we got pretty low. So we wanted to find out at that point what it actually took to charge this thing up from 3 to 100%. And to do that, our local electrician, Paul Marsden, from PMG Installations, he kindly came out and he brought with him a data logger, which he tapped into the electric feed that we were charging this thing up with, basically an amp meter effectively, and he was able to monitor the current on each of the 3 phases. So we got all that rigged up, and it basically enabled us to find out exactly how much it took to charge this machine. Now, it's a 24 kilowatt hour battery, and it pretty much took us just over 23.5 kilowatt hours to charge this thing up. So it did do what it said on the tin, and it charged it up in exactly the same time that JCB said it was. So using that external charge, it took an hour and 45 minutes, so just shy of an hour and 50 minutes, which is what JCB says it will need for a full charge. Like I say, that's all in the full review video. Now, if you work that one out, depending on what your electricity rate is, here on the farm here, it's 15.7 pence per unit. So if you do the calculations, basically per full charge, it works out at £3.70 to charge it up. So fairly cheap, but again, it depends on your use. Right, now, another cracker question following on from that one. How many hours will that last from a full charge? And that's from David Easel 1 from the Farming Forum. Well, we've been using it on a variety of jobs throughout the past few days. So to give you an example, day 1, we did some fairly light duty. So we did a bit of mucking out of some calf pens. It was fairly light, fluffy stuff. We moved a bit of straw from the front of a silage clamp, so we moved some straw off there. We dished out a bit of silage with it, not much, dished out a bit of silage, and we filled the diet feeder as well. Now, you could say that's sort of a day of very light duties. And the battery lasted fine on that. It still had about 30% left after it had done all that. And then it worked all the way over weekend, just doing the normal routine jobs, filling diet feeder, and it pretty much lasted all weekend on that one. And then we had a day of sort of heavy duty work with it, where we were mucking out some calf pens and some really dense, proper bedding muck. And it did probably about 2 hours worth of work, and we're only left with 30%. So in 2 hours, it chomped through 70%. Now, granted, we did have the heaters on, and we had the heated windows on. So it is, obviously, it's going to vary depending on what you're doing. So that's kind of sort of roughly what we found. Like I say, we've got the full review video. You'll find out a little bit more in that one as well. Right. Peter Parker on Facebook asks, are there any audio warnings when you're driving about the yard? Well, no, not really. When you're going forward, there is no audio warnings. When you are backing up, there is the usual reversing noise, the beeper, the buzzer, whatever you want to call it. So that warns people around the yard that you're backing up. But there's nothing to warn people when you're going forwards. Now, granted, as I've been sort of stood out the machine watching other people drive it as well, you can hear it coming. It sounds a lot like a normal hydrostatic transmission telehandler coming towards you. You get that sort of usual transmission whine. But at slow speeds, it is pretty much silent. It's proper stealthy. You can creep up on people with it. So I would say you need to be, if you are using this around the yard, the driver is going to need to be aware of the people that are working around, and the people in the yard are going to need to be aware of that there's a silent machine running around as well. Right, moving on. Susan Pinder on Facebook asks, is it similar in weight to a diesel Counterpart? Well, actually, it's not a million miles off. They are pretty similar. This electric model is 5,280 kilograms-ish, thereabouts. And the diesel equivalent of this, the 52560, that is 5,500 kilograms. So only, what's 320 kilograms difference between them. And the JCB says the reason for that is, the reason why this electric version is just that little bit lighter is the fact that they can actually place the components where they want, and they don't then need extra ballasting. So it is a more sort of naturally ballasted machine, you could say. Next one from Danny Lydiot on Facebook. How does it compare to the diesel version? Well, performance-wise, this electric version, it's absolutely spot on. It's absolutely comparable to the diesel version. I would say it would definitely keep up with the diesel version, and in fact, it's actually a little bit easier to drive than the diesel version, and I would say it's just a little bit more precise as well, particularly with the, you know, the transmission and the hydraulics as well. As mentioned, there'll be a lot more about the performance in the full review video in a couple of weeks. Right, one that you're probably all asking, what's the price? And that comes from Tipperary Mick on YouTube. Right, you might want to sit down for this bit. So, the 52560E, the electric model, this one, that retails at £87,435. Now, compare that to the diesel version, the 52560 Agri Plus, that is £64,270. So far we've got more than a 20 grand difference. And then if you want the rapid charger, the rapid offboard charger, which is the 3-phase 32 amp rapid offboard charger, that's another 6.5 grand for that as well. And that's the one that gets you charged up in an hour and 50 minutes from 0 to 100%. If you don't go for that and you use the onboard charger, which is a single phase 16 amp, you're looking at a bit of an overnight job for charging. It's a good 8 hours. But again, a lot more on charging in the full review video. Now, a few good comments here from Michael N123 and Non-Mouse on the farming forum. They are saying it seems to be more of a yard machine. And you know what? I would definitely agree with that. After driving it for a few days this week, I would say, based on its sort of battery range and battery life and things like that, this is aimed at the yard. Right? It ain't going to go anywhere else. You ain't going to be nipping up the road with a trailer on and shifting bales, anything like that. That is for a larger diesel-powered machine. And then another good one from AC Engineering on the farming forum. It looks more like a second farm machine. Well, yeah, it could be. Definitely. It's certainly an option. I know on larger dairy units and things like that, they'll have a big telehandler or a big pivot steer machine doing like the big bulky work, and then they'll have a runaround machine doing all the darting in and out of buildings, possibly bedding work, things like that. Yeah, it could be a good second machine, but as we've just seen the price, it is an expensive second machine. Right, Welly Track on the farming forum is saying, looks a good machine where emissions are an issue. Yes, definitely. And I would say this is the main reason for this machine's development. It is ideal for indoor construction areas, greenhouses, polytunnels, packhouses, livery yards, places like that. And then moving on, why do this with a small machine? Why do a battery-powered version of a small machine? And SJT01 on the farming forum has asked that one. Right, well, to answer that, I would say with current battery technology, small machines suit to being battery powered, and I would say that this machine in particular is the upper limit of being battery powered. This machine is part of what JCB calls its E-Tech range, which is a bunch of smaller compact machines, mini diggers, forklifts, scissor lifts, things like that, all suited to being battery powered and all suited to working in all those places that I've already said. Whereas once you get larger than this machine, I would say the battery power just ain't suitable. You either need diesel, or if you're going to stick with the green credentials, which JCB is romping on with its road to zero emissions, that's where future fuels like hydrogen power come into their own. Also, as well, once you start trying to put batteries and electrify larger machines, that's when they need massive, massive batteries just to get the things moving as well. So, does it use power if the ignition is left on, and how much is a replacement battery and how long will it last? That is Jack of all trades on the farming forum. Well, does it use power if the ignition is left on? Right, from what we found, if you're on the seat and you've got the ignition turned on, and like I say, you're still sat on the seat, it will use a small amount of power. And what you can hear is, while you're sat on the seat, like this actually, I've still got this thing turned on, you can hear the hydraulic motor spinning in the background. Now that's spinning in a sort of state of readiness. It's ready for you to operate the steering, like that. So steering will work now, stationary, and it's ready for the brakes and things like that. Now, as soon as you get off the seat and you leave the ignition on, that motor stops spinning. So at that point, it will use pretty much next to nothing in terms of power. If you've got anything still fired up in here, such as the heaters and the heated windscreens and things like that, yeah, that's going to take power, but not as much as it is as I'm sat here right now. You can still hear the hydraulic motor spinning. It's only spinning a little bit. We can liven it up if we use the joystick like that. So yeah, that is, as you're sat on the seat with the ignition on, it is sort of spinning in a state of readiness. Right, moving on. How much to replace a battery if you really wanted to replace a battery? Well, I asked JCB this and the answer was it's unknown, but it shouldn't need to be done, as a machine comes with a 5,000 cycle warranty for the battery through the battery supplier, which is Jungheinrich, which is a German firm. They are specialists in forklift technology, and they supplied the battery and the electric motors that are on this machine. So, if we break that down, the battery should last 5,000 cycles. What they mean by that is 5,000 full, not partial, full charging cycles. So, if you were charging this machine twice a day, fully, so evening and maybe at dinner time, basically that battery would last about 6.8 years, right? Now, at that point, JCB is telling me that battery's still actually good to go. It'll still be about 80% efficient at that point, and you can still use it. At that point, would you want to replace the battery? I mean, the machine, you know, the actual telehandler itself, it's getting on a bit. It'll be 7 years old by then. If you're only charging once a day or 1.5 a day, the machine could be 10, 12, 13, 15-year-old by the time the battery goes knackered. So really, that is actually probably for me one of the biggest question marks hanging over this machine. What do you do with it at the end of its life? What do you do with the battery at the end of its life? Does it have an export market? Who knows? I just can't answer that bit right now. Oh, and then just sort of as an extension to that question, it is the battery technology which is the reason why this machine is a lot more expensive compared to the diesel machine. So it kind of gives you a rough idea of how much that battery costs, right? So, moving on. Right, this is a good one. Is it suitable for towing from a few miles away? That is from Holwell Court Farm on the Farming Forum. It does have a clever switch on the back with a pin. You could tow some little things if you want, but to be honest, like we've kind of said, no, not really. It's not a towing machine. It's not a climbing machine. You're not going to go butt raking. It is a yard machine running around on concrete. It's basically the next level up from a forklift. I think that's kind of sort of sums it up-ish. Like I say, watch the full review video. You'll get a lot better idea of what this machine is capable of. It is, like I said, performance-wise, around the farm, it is a bloody good performer. It is absolutely on a par with a diesel. But the question mark is over that battery. You know, battery life, you know, having to plan in the charging of it, things like that. But hopefully, a couple of weeks, go and watch the full review video. You'll get a much better idea of what the machine can do, and hopefully will at that point give you guys lots of information, and you can kind of form your own opinion on this machine and where it would fit in in terms of what industry it will fit in, or where it would fit in the farming industry, and what things you could actually do with it. There we go. Right, final one from Chris Nag on Facebook. Can you charge your phone in the cab? Right, let's have a look. Yes, you can. There is a 12 volt supply here, just down there. There you go. Yes, you can. Just like anything else in here that needs electric, just be aware, every time you use electric on this machine, you're taking power away from it. So turn up with a fully charged phone is my advice. So, I mean, there you go. That's a few questions answered. I hope that helps so far. Like I say, we've got the full review coming up in a couple of weeks, which will give you a bigger flavour about this machine. So until then, thanks for sending your questions in. If you've got any more, just chuck them in the comments, just chuck them in the thread. We'll try and answer a few more as we go on. But yeah, thank you very much for sending your questions. The full review video is coming up in a couple of weeks. And until then, we'll catch you in a bit. Cheers!